The GOP's religious and moral hypocrisy is now on full display in Texas. Hello everybody, David Shuster here. In the wake of the horrific floods that killed more than 100 people, including dozens of children, Republican Senator Ted Cruz is offering this.
All I know to do is to lean on God, to lean on prayer, to lean on family, to lean on friends. God is a good and loving God, and he will help us through this.
Clearly, faith is important to Ted Cruz and a lot of other Republicans in this time of tragedy. And I get that in a crisis or amidst profound grief, faith can be helpful and soothing. But if you're a true believer, as Ted Cruz and other Republicans claim to be, shouldn't their faith and religious values guide their feelings and actions day in and day out? That doesn't happen with many Republicans, at least many Republicans in Congress. Case in point, the Trump tax and spending bill Republicans just passed. It makes the biggest cut in America's social safety net programs in U.S. history. Experts predict it will cause an estimated 17 million Americans to lose their health coverage.
The Yale Budget Lab estimates that it will kill, over 10 years, 100,000 people. That is 2,000 days of death like we've seen in Texas this weekend. In my 70 years, I've never been as embarrassed for my country.
2,000 days of death like the Texas floods. In other words, 100 people dying every day for 5.5 years. And that's because the Republican legislation cuts Medicaid and food assistance benefits, strips away child tax credits for millions of low-income families, increases financial burdens for the poor and working class, and will close rural hospitals and nursing homes. At the same time, the bill gives tax breaks to billionaires. Democrat James Talarico, a consistent man of faith, recently spoke about the Trump Republican bill in the context of Christian biblical teachings.
What would Jesus do about a tax system that benefits the rich over the poor? What would Jesus do about a healthcare system that forces the sick to start GoFundMe pages to afford life-saving surgeries? What would Jesus do about an education system that ties a child's school funding to their community's property wealth? What would Jesus do about a justice system that incarcerates more people than any other country on the face of the earth? And what would Jesus do about an economic system that prioritizes profits over the health of our planet? Would he stay in his room and pray? Or would he walk into the seat of power and flip over the tables of injustice? We Christians are called to do more than charity. We are called to challenge the systems that make charity necessary.
And one of the systems that will make even more charity necessary in the coming years is Trump's big, beautiful bill. Now, to be clear, I get the argument that charity should be carried out first and foremost by churches and private religious institutions.
With every disaster, one of the things we see here in Texas is the church steps up and the church helps and the church feeds and clothes and comforts.
That's fine. And I know a lot of Christian conservatives believe the government should stay out of charity work. But if that is the prevailing wisdom, why is Ted Cruz asking for, and the federal government now pledging, help and charity to the victims and communities ravaged by the Texas floods? Under Republican logic, shouldn't all of that help only come from the churches? Of course, I disagree with that. In my view, the federal government should do everything it can to help ease the financial burden and soothe the physical and emotional scars of every family affected by the floods. And I embrace the federal help that Donald Trump is pledging now. But that federal help, that assistance, should be a guiding principle in preventing tragedies and death ahead of time. We know that preventative medical help and treatment saves lives. We know that expanding food assistance instead of cutting it boosts children's health and well-being. We know that a fully staffed National Weather Service gives communities more warning and time to get out of harm's way. And yet Republicans don't want to talk about any of that right now.
Do you have concerns about National Weather Service staffing? Those are issues that will be addressed by DHS and NOAA and other components as they move forward. Now is not the day for that type of conversation. I would encourage the congressman to be wrapping his arms and his heart and his prayers around these families.
Franklin Graham and I had a call and a prayer, and shared some scriptures with families at a church that were still waiting to find their loved ones, and spent some time visiting with them and talking to them about this difficult situation.
In other words, pray now, but don't let prayer or religious values guide your actions when making policy in advance.
The mayor asked for prayers. And I want to say thank you to the millions of Texans, to the millions of Americans, to the millions of people all over the world right now who are praying for Texas and praying for those parents.
Again, I support those prayers, and I support whatever action, spiritually or physically, that anybody wants to take to help fellow human beings who are suffering. But the fact is, we can also use faith and religious principles to prevent suffering. And when Republicans ignore preventative actions or pass cruel legislation and then invoke God in prayer only after tragedy and death, the GOP becomes the very symbol of hypocrisy and moral turpitude that so many Americans hate. If you want to wear your faith on your sleeve, go ahead. But maybe, just maybe, try reading and following the Bible instead of just claiming it. By the way, Donald Trump's Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, or ICE, is now facing $1 million lawsuit for this.
No les abra! Yo, are you serious, bro?
In Los Angeles, that's the voice of Joe Garcia, the man filming the ICE agents. And now they've thrown him to the ground.
You want to go to jail? Fine. You got it.
The pressure of like the knee on like my back and like his hand on my neck, like I felt like, is this it for me?
U.S. citizen seeks $1 million after arrest, detention for recording immigration raid at Home Depot. Witnesses recorded the violent takedown of Garcia, and legal experts say the ICE arrest was clearly unlawful, given that agents trampled on Garcia's First Amendment rights. The Border Patrol and ICE agents unlawfully restrained and detained Mr. Garcia for more than 24 hours without any valid grounds for interfering with his liberty and freedom of movement, and they did so based on legally prohibited grounds. Garcia is a PhD student at Claremont University. He told ABC News the officer seemed surprised when Garcia said, "I'm a U.S. citizen." He says he was first taken to a holding area at Dodger Stadium where he heard the agents boasting about how many people they had grabbed.
How many bodies did you guys get today? And one of them said 31, and they started like, yay, like it was a good day today, and they were like high-fiving.
Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular from Railhunk, who wrote, "Why is it that the men with weapons and body armor are the most afraid for their lives?" Well, perhaps it's because deep inside they know that what they are doing is immoral and wrong. Anyway, I look forward to reading your comments about the MAGA Trump Christianity getting exposed for its selectiveness and for its hypocrisy. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.